start. Yeah. But yeah.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us today for today's discussion on this very important topic. Though it's not discussed as often as it should be, I'm hoping that this book and other discourses around it would make some kind of a difference and build up a narrative, a more voluminous narrative around it. So on behalf of everybody over here, the authors and Springer Nature, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us today. And those of you who would make time for this broadcast later when you hear the recording. And special thanks and gratitude for Dr. Peter Maurer, who's the president of International Committee of the Red Cross, for sparing his valuable time for this discussion. Today's discussion, as you know, is based on this recently published book, research monograph, which is titled Sexual and Gender-Based Violence in International Law, Making International Institutions Work. So this is authored by Professor Bharat Desai and Dr. Momita Mandal, both of whom are here in the panel. And the book also benefits from a foreword by Dr. Maurer, for which I would like to thank him again. The book is part of Springer Nature's growing portfolio of content related to the SDGs that we have been publishing over the past few years, with special focus on them. And I myself am closely related to SDG 16. And this book is also an important part of that, the group of books that are part of that SDG portfolio. And I'm very happy to see the usage that it is already gaining, and which you can visit the book site to check and also read the book. Please feel free to request either me or Professor Bharat Desai for a reading link, which will allow you to read the content of the book, even if you are not able to download it. More on the book, there's a very eminent panel over here, and they are going to talk about it and enlighten you about it. I would just like to take just a couple of minutes again to stress on the importance of this topic, because it was deemed so important that the book was one of the few that was recognized as something to be also translated into German. So we are having a German translation of the book coming out soon, probably in a couple of months, and it will be released as part of our German portfolio. So that's another round of congratulations for the authors and also for the readers. So I see that we are having a lot of people joining us now. So I would, without taking much of your time, I would pass on the mic to Professor Bharat Desai now to chair the session. And thank you again for joining us, and looking forward to very, very interesting and insightful discussions on the topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nupur Singh, for this, providing the context of the book and little, generous introduction. We are deeply honored that Dr. Peter Maurer, the president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, has kindly, not only written the foreword to the book, but also, agreed to join, for this online book release, and to have a little discussion to follow. But before I switch to that, let me request my co-author, Dr. Momita Mandal, to briefly give a little gist about the book. Over to you, Momita.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Good afternoon. and good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Maumita Mandal, co-author of the book that we are going to release today. So I'm going to briefly tell about the book. The title of the book is Sexual and Gender-Based Violence in International Law, Making International Institutions Work. Sexual and gender-based violence prevails since time immemorial. The abbreviation is SGBV. So SGBV is still a taboo, spoken in whispers and suffered in silence. It takes place during peacetime, conflicts, and post-conflict situations. Though SGBV is perpetrated against men, women, and LGBTI people, this book has focused on women and girls as main victims or survivors. The book addresses SGBV against women from an international law point of view. It identifies the reasons behind SGBV against women with a specific focus on cultural practices and highlights the legal challenges relating to SGBV. The 7 chapters of the book comprise introduction. Second chapter is SGBV, a global concern. Third is international legal protection against SGBV. Fourth one is role of cultural factors. Fifth chapter is role of international institutions. And sixth chapter is legal challenges. And lastly, conclusions. The book seeks to explore a possible future roadmap for the international institutions like the United Nations, International Committee of the Red Cross, as well as the states, scholars, civil society organizations, and other actors. According to the ICRC President, Dr. Peter Maurer, SGBV is not inevitable, and indeed, if it is predictable, it is preventable. How does one translate this into action? This book seeks to provide mechanisms to eliminate SGBV that are 3D formula. One is defunct, second one is de-inevitabilized, and third one is legitimized. And second formula is 3 I's or 3 international instruments. First one is specially designed legally binding protocol on SGBV under the 1949 Geneva Conventions. Second one is insertion of a separate crime of SGBV under the Rome Statute. And last one is designing of a less specialist international legal instrument. So this is all about the book. Thank you. Over to you, Professor Desai.
Thank you, Dr. Maumita. Yeah, well, again, let me now, with this brief introduction provided by Nupur Singh and Maumita Mandal, about the book itself. Let me now, turn to you, Peter, and let me again briefly mention about, Dr. Peter Maurer's standing. He has a PhD in international law. He has been a very eminent, Swiss diplomat, with a veteran of United Nations affairs. I had the privilege of interacting with him something almost 15 years ago at the UN headquarters. When I had the privilege to speak and make some presentations on when he was the co-chair of a high-level panel, along with a Mexican envoy to United Nations. And after assuming his presidency of the ICRC, he has put ICRC on a very strong footing. It has a robust presence in some 100 countries. And the visibility and the kind of the the seriousness with which ICRC's work has been taken. That also speaks volumes about the quantum jump in the budget of the ICRC during Peter's tenure itself. Now let me try to provide a context. Series of these events. In last in the context in which this we are about to have this have a little focus on the book itself. But before that, let me make little for the sake of a little formality, request Peter, to show, if you got a, a printout of the cover of the book, just for a symbolic, release, within the limits of the forum, here is the, the cover page and, the title, and then shows, so forward by Peter Moore. Thank you, Peter. Yeah. Now let me just little draw the little context in which we are having today's event. As you'll recall, Peter, not going too far into the past. On 19th of May, for instance, the United Nations Security Council had an open debate on conflicts and food security. On 19th of June, ICRC put on a global event to have this International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflicts. And with that symbolic, uprooted tree with a raid, those roots which were put in the public two public places in Geneva city itself. That was a very powerful symbolic kind of a message which ICRC as a humanitarian, global humanitarian watchdog, sought to convey to the world. On 22nd of July, there was a very famous, Black Sea Grain Agreement, which, with the United Nations Secretary General's good offices, which provided a little, a window for something about 20 million tons of, Ukrainian wheats, which are, stored in godowns, which probably, created a kind of a global food crisis, and largely many of the something like 50 countries which depend upon wheat, from Russia and Ukraine, both of which are at war. So you could see the implications of the war, on the global food security, the conflict, the effect of the conflicts on food security. On 3rd of August, the United Nations Secretary General again on at the UN headquarters, displayed what is called some kind of a memento on abuse ammunition, which sought to provide a very powerful message, on use and abuse of ammunition in some of the conflict zone, especially in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 2 United Nations, human rights experts were killed, on duty, and while doing it. And one could see that even just few days ago, the UN compound the Congolese capital was attacked, and 3 peacekeepers were killed, including two from the Indian peacekeeping contingent and 1 from Morocco. This is a graphic reality at the ground level situation. And in the first half of this month itself, we had a series of events focusing on the use or the kind of a possible use, of nuclear weapons in the conflict zones. On the 1st of August, the Secretary General again, spoke, in New York with the inauguration of the 10th review meeting of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. On 6th of August, we had the Hiroshima Day. 9th of August, we had the Nagasaki Day, which showed graphic reality about the kind of the living danger which we face, even like the use of these weapons of war, So these are the graphic reality on the ground level situation, And in this context, Peter, how do you view role of the International Committee of the Red Cross, to grapple with this entire chain of this, I would say the weapons of different kinds and trajectories of weapons of war and the conflicts which ICRC has been now putting on its social media accounts. There are 100 conflicts taking place in the world in 60 countries and more than 100 non-state groups which are active, and it is really a cause of great concern. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks a lot, Bharat, for setting the scene, and also for Nupur and Moumita for all the kind words and the introductions and framing of the issue of the book. To the larger question you ask, I think the role of the International Committee of the Red Cross is largely defined over the last 160 years of our existence by a sort of a 3-pronged approach to which we look at war, violence, and conflict around the world. And it is that these specific events need to be framed along international humanitarian law and the development of a legal framework for the specific case of armed conflict and other situations of violence. That's the sort of legal angle that we take, and I think to which we have helped develop international humanitarian law through the Geneva Conventions and other international instruments. A second approach is very much when I listen to the panoply of striking events related to that you have explained and set the scene with, Bharat. I think our legal thinking is heavily informed by the challenges that law, violence, and conflict bring to us as a humanitarian frontline organization, working in proximity of people and communities to assist and protect them, always together with national societies of the Red Cross. But our experience comes from frontline and frontline needs of victims. And we try to assist and protect operationally people as we are there, and at the same time to develop ideas on legal frameworks necessary in order to contain and to prevent in the future a further degradation of the situation of civilians and people affected in war. And there is a link between our legal mandate to advise states in how international law should be developed and our operational activities to assist and protect on the ground. And the link in between is what I call policy and diplomacy. I think from our experience on the ground, states who have given us the mandate to look over the Geneva Convention also expect from us that we tell them what are the most pressing needs and gaps, and how can you either through interpretation and consensus of states on law, or through operational activities, or through domestic law, how can you as states respond to the challenges? And that's what I would call our policy and diplomatic advice. That's the reason why in the past we advised states to engage on mine action, and we were very critical in bringing the Ottawa Convention forward, or on nuclear arms, and we were amongst the first ones to be very critical and engage as humanitarians for nuclear disarmament, as we were present in Hiroshima and also witness to what has happened. But we took that as an engagement. And now maybe to switch to the book and to the title of the book, it's a little bit similar. I have to confess, when I started my tenure at the ICRC, sexual violence and sexual and gender-based violence in conflict was not the first thing I would have mentioned to you on my mind as being the most important pressure which comes towards us. I was in a kind of a traditional framework. People need food, medicine, shelter, water. That's the basics of humanitarian assistance. But as we moved forward over the last couple of years, as you rightly say, but as conflicts complexified, as we were confronted with an increased degradation of cohesion of societies, with fragmentation of armed groups, with ill behavior of belligerents, state and non-state in conflict, we saw that sexual and gender-based violence during war and conflict was an underestimated and an undervalued problem. It was underestimated and undervalued because it was a tabooed and not spoken about issue. But once you dig under the surface, you see that it is a prevalent violation of international law, an attack on human dignity, and therefore we made sexual and gender-based violence an important issue of concern at the ICRC and we tried to respond operationally through our programs, legally through interpretation of international humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions, and also through policy engagement with states recommending what they can do in order to address an issue which was much bigger under the surface than over the surface. When you bomb a city and civilian infrastructure is destroyed, you see it, you can feel it, and you see what you need to do. You need to establish water, sanitation, health infrastructure. If you are a victim of sexual violence, you don't see it immediately. You have to look for it. And I think that has been the sea change also, and that has made sexual and gender-based violence an important priority of our work. And I may add a last point, which was important in bringing the ICRC along to make this a high priority issue. And this is our work in detention. As you may know, we have through the Geneva Convention an important mandate to visit prisoners of war, but we have also expanded considerably and offered our services even in non-international armed conflict. And we are visiting in more than 90 countries of the world every year, more than or several 100,000 prisoners. And while sexual and gender-based violence in outside of detention is most of the time associated with women being victims, we saw that in detention, in prison, very often men, boys are victims also of sexual and gender-based violence. And this has sharpened our consciousness that it is not exclusively a women's issue, but it is a much broader gender issue which affects all expressions of gender. And this has certainly shaped our consciousness to make this an important operational, legal, and policy issue. And this is what I wanted also to express in my foreword to the book.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Now, as we know, I think the root causes, I think lie we have always been, since time immemorial, we have been speaking about, outlawry of war, like starting with the Hague Conventions and, series of those events, going down to the history and the very genesis of the birth of the ICRC itself, So, something which war has been regarded as neither legal nor illegal. Something is extra legal. It just happens, And almost always this was, like you rightly mentioned, that this was not on the radar screen. It was invisible. It was not given a priority. The use of sexual violence as an instrument was regarded as a act of few renegade elements, something where the people go berserk, but here about what we have seen over the years consistently, and that is exactly what brought the issue to the agenda of the United Nations Security Council with resolution 1325 in 2000 itself. You could see that that means the whole securitization, because that assumed that kind of a gravity. And since there is an increasing use of sexual violence as an instrument, because they say you are not talking about rape out of control, it's a rape under orders, And one could see this reflection in the 2018, Nobel Prize acceptance speech of Denis Mukwege, the Congolese gynecologist, when he said that, well, there are, don't draw the, provide the red carpet to the perpetrators, draw the red lines, So there is something like you yourself said in your preface, that is a heinously prevalent scourge, like what the, war itself is a scourge. And here is a very, very integral part of the phenomenon of war, where it is being used as a kind of a powerful weapon by almost all the warring factions, and in some of the cases, even by the governmental forces. The question is, as a humanitarian, actor right on the grassroots, as compared to any other entity, although the United Nations system has, the UN Secretary has appointed a special envoy, there is a special rapporteur, there is a, UN woman is engaged, all those, but ICRC has the edge because you feel it, you see what is happening, as compared to the humanitarian need. The question is, how does one, like you rightly said, this is not inevitable. The question is, how does one de-inevitabilize scores, as we say, use of sexual violence, which is done on purpose by the warring faction. We have seen most of the theaters of conflicts, like even in the Indian subcontinent around us, we don't need to name the countries where we saw that, huge things happen. Second World War, it happened everywhere. How does one make it, not inevitable?
Well, that's a great question, Bharat, and I think the response you will see is intrinsically linked also to a more broader understanding that ICRC has on how best to ensure respect for norms and principles in society. If you would have asked me this question 20 or 30 years ago, any president of the ICRC would have almost exclusively focused on basically reconfirming the law and training belligerents in the respect of the law. And I wouldn't say that this is superfluous. It's still basic work that we are engaged in. But sexual and gender-based violence has also sharpened our consciousness that we must do more. And some of the phenomena that you have described have really intensified our work around sexual and gender-based violence over the last couple of years, and I would like to mention some of them. We have delved into behavioral science over the last couple of years, much more in the context of sexual and gender-based violence, and have tried to understand what makes either state or non-state armed groups basically go berserk, as you have said, and forget about the respect of international law in general and about behavior against the civilian population when engaging in sexual and gender-based violence. And I think what we have found out is that while you can prevent a certain amount of bad things happening through education and training, you need to look at behavioral sciences, at in-group behavior, at how groups of armed, mostly men, behave towards civil society, what informal codes of behaviors are, how the sort of structure of command is, how the accountability structures are, but also how informal codes of conduct of armed forces and armed groups are. And what we found is that normally state armies, if you do more training, you get better behavior in structured armed forces. With non-state armed groups, it needs more of an influence of communities around and of leaders around. Non-state armed groups, in many of the contexts in which we operate, can operate and operate badly because there is not enough resistance from community and community leadership. So ICRC started to engage with communities, with community leaderships, with religious leaders, in order to have them on the side of speaking out against sexual and gender-based violence. If you are a good Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, we wanted religious leader to come out and say, you don't do this. This is not what you are, and this is not what this fight is about. You need to have proactive religious and community leadership. You need also to really engage with victims and listen about their specific needs and how you respond to those needs. And then to make them speak and to engage into trustful relationship. You need to continuously, on a day-to-day basis, engage with the armed groups. I have seen myself in many of the visits in the fields that I did through my last 10 years at the ICRC, how powerful it is when delegates of ICRC who are present in hospitals, in schools, in communities, at the same time can reach out to the armed forces, to the commander, to the non-state armed group, which is just in front of the village, and which in the night may raid into the village and misbehave, may raid the hospital and misbehave. We need to have sort of on-the-spot reaction in the dialogue that we lead with armed forces on the ground. So these are some of the very practical recipe, and as your book and also your activities is focusing on law, I think what transpires from this broad experience with community, with armed actors, state and non-state, what transpires from behavioral science, from our practical work to looking at victims, is a series of recommendations how to create conditions conducive to respect of the law and respect of behavior and non-engagement into sexual violence. It's the multiplicity. Some of the responses will be legal, and we have done a checklist for countries, what can you do in law, in domestic law, in order to create conditions which are legally more satisfying and which will prevent that sexual and gender-based violence becomes a prevalent feature in society. And this checklist really goes from law to policy to strengthening community, to put in place aid systems. So we have to look at gender-based violence as sexual and gender-based violence as a multifaceted phenomenon in which the law is an important component, but not the only one, but which needs policies in place, which need to adapt to the contextual situation. Sorry for being a little bit long in my response, but I wanted to give you a sense how important it is for an organization like ICRC that its policy and legal recommendations are rooted in our experience and are driven also by the problems on the ground. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Now, I think my colleague is telling me that only 4 minutes left. What I'll think, this is a very long discussion. Maybe we'll catch up with this, some other time.